The singleton pattern restricts the creation of an object to just one single instance. Doesn't matter how many times you try to call the instance creation method, only one instance will be created. Today we're going to check out how to build a singleton in Java. The importance of understanding why we're trying to restrict the amount of instances that we create is because there are some very valid reasons for it. A lot of times we just want to restrict how many connections to a database happen. In other situations, there's an actual rule of how many objects we create, and in another instances, for example, there can only be one single president of the United States and 535 members on Congress, not one, not less. 9 Supreme Court justices. So there is, just with, beyond those two examples, instances where you definitely want to control the amount of instances that you are creating with a single object. Today we're going to go through the process of doing it with a singleton, which restricts to just one. From there you can derive into doing it with a larger sample. So let's get started. So let's assume that we start from a single simple class, and the first thing that we gotta do is to restrict the creation of objects. So we're gonna convert the constructor to private, so that way only this class can call it, and therefore this class has the absolute control of how to call the constructor. The next thing is that we need to replace this constructor with an instance method. We're gonna replace the constructor so that other things outside of this object can call it. So we're gonna do a public static singleton get instance, and you're gonna see this get instance called more often. And then we're gonna hold a static singleton as a member variable. That means that we're gonna hold a private singleton instance, the singleton constructor, and an entryway. So we don't need to do anything to the constructor. Just the fact that we changed it, it's gonna change the way that we are. Just the fact that we change the access, it's gonna be enough. But here, what we gotta do is check if our instance is null. Then we create. We're gonna create that instance, and then we're gonna return instance. This simple trick here is gonna double check if we haven't allocated anything. Then it's gonna create the instance, and if it is null, that means that if it hasn't been created before. Once it has been created, it's always going to return that single instance. Now let's go and explore how this code would do it. So we're gonna put a few of these guys, and we're going to just double check by adding a line here, and we're gonna add our debugger. So we're gonna now execute our singleton. It's really simple, but it's just a super simple way of blocking. The main thing again is blocking the creation, providing an entry point, and holding that single instance as a class method. And so you can see here that singleton.getInstance didn't need an instance to get an instance of a singleton. Might be a little bit confusing if you're new with static and instance variables, but if that is the case, then check out the video of the first class of this class. If this is confusing, check out the video of the actual lecture to try to see the differences between instance and static members. So you can see here, once it's stopped, that the singleton at 466 is the object that it's always created. If we tried to do singleton, in this case it could work because we're still within the same class, it still would work. But if we went and created in our project a new Java class and said s test, and we copied our, let's just add more area, and we copied this guy here, and singleton I equals new singleton. It's not going to allow me to do that because it's going to say that it has a private access in singleton. Here, however, I am allowed to do that. Because I am still within the class, and if you remember, private gives access to the class to call that. That's why we're leveraging that in here. This private keyword, we're leveraging it so we can create it inside of the class. Anything outside of the class needs to call this static get instance method to retrieve a singleton instance. Now, for different things, you can have an array or a list. For longer elements, when you need to keep something, you can have a list and then essentially keep a count whenever you're instancing, and be careful to not create more than what you actually need. And that's basically it with a singleton. I hope you liked it.